Shuhanti tat Pavitra kirtim tamalanga shashanam Bhavanaho dveshti shivam shivetara Gireritam ninam Sakrit prasangad agamashu hantitat Pavitra kirtim tamalangya shasanam Bhavanaho dveshti shivam shivetara Aksharam nama gireritam rinam Sakrit prasangad agam ashuhanti tat Pavitra kirtim tamalangya shasanam Bhavanaho dveshti shivam shivetara. Ladies, Shivetara. Yat which Dviaksharam consisting of two letters, Nama named, Gira iritam merely being pronounced by the tongue. Nrinam persons, Sakrit once, Prasangat from the heart, Agham sinful activities, Asho immediately, Hanti destroys, Tat that, Pavitra kirtim whose fame is pure, Tam him, Alangya shasanam whose order is never neglected, Bhavan you, Aho O Dveshti envy, Shivam Lord Shiva, Shiva Itara who are inauspicious. Translation, Sati continued, my dear father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name consisting of two syllables, Shi and Va, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but you envies him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Since Lord Shiva is the greatest soul among the living entities within this material world, his name, Shiva, is very auspicious for persons who identify the body with the soul. If such persons take shelter of Lord Shiva, gradually they will understand that they are not the material body, but our spirit soul. Shiva means Mangala, or auspicious. Within the body, the soul is auspicious. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. This realization is auspicious. As long as one does not realize his identity as the soul, whatever he does is inauspicious. Shiva means auspicious, and devotees of Lord Shiva gradually come to the platform of spiritual identification. But that is not all. Auspicious life begins from the point of spiritual identification, but there are still more duties. One has to understand one's relationship with the Supreme Soul. If one is actually a devotee of Lord Shiva, he comes to the platform of spiritual realization. But if he is not intelligent enough, then he stops at that point, only realizing that he is spirit soul, Aham Brahmasmi. If he is intelligent enough, however, he should continue to act in the way of Lord Shiva. For Lord Shiva is always absorbed in the thought of Vasudeva. As previously explained, Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam. Lord Shiva is always in meditation on the lotus feet of Vasudeva, Sri Krishna. Thus, the auspicious position of Lord Shiva is realized if one takes to the worship of Vishnu, because Lord Shiva says in the Shiva Purana that the topmost worship is worship of Lord Vishnu. Lord Shiva is worshipped because he is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu. One should not, however, make the mistake of considering Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu to be on the same level. That is also an atheistic idea. It is also enjoined in the Vaishnaviya Purana that Vishnu, or Narayan, is the exalted Supreme Personality of Godhead, and no one should be compared to him as equal, even Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, not to speak of other demigods. Yad duyaksharam nama gireritam ninam sakrit prasangad agamashu hantitat pavitrakirtim tamalanga shasanam bhavanaho dveshti shivam shivetara. Sati continued, my dear father, you are committing the greatest offense by envying Lord Shiva, whose very name, consisting of two syllables, Shi and Va, purifies one of all sinful activities. His order is never neglected. Lord Shiva is always pure, and no one but you envies him. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutle Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yes, so Sati is continuing and will continue to continue, expressing her feelings of anger and frustration to her father Daksha. And yes, she is really in a state of extreme concern, one could say. Extreme concern and extreme anger at her father, who's just, who's, as we know, we've been going through these verses for weeks now, he's just consumed by a most horrible type of envy and anger. Envy and anger, perhaps the envy comes first, but combination of envy and anger, which has just eaten his heart away and just eaten his intelligence away. And therefore he is just, he's lost all his intelligence. Basically lost the better part, at least, of his intelligence, and is acting like a crazy man, like some sort of crazy atheist who just has some fanatical attitude problem. Generally, of course, the atheists, they have an attitude problem towards God, or Krishna, or just God, depending on the culture they're from. But it's just like that. I remember many years ago, in the school, there's a school up the road that side somewhere, not far away. And we went and did a program there to the older students. And there was this one boy who was just really deeply attached to the Big Bang theory, in very simple terms, that in the beginning there was basically nothing, but then somehow there was a Big Bang and everything that we're familiar with in this world came to be. Something like that. So we tried to help him to understand that that theory is not really very intelligent, that from some big, really big bang, like a massive explosion, directly from that, as a direct result of that, comes so many nice things, or the world as we know it with all its features. Yes, so we are trying to explain that it's not really very rational. If we have some idea, some theory, then the scientific approach, at least in theory, is that you do an experiment in terms of whatever your theory is, and then you see what the result is, and then that you accept, basically you accept as being reality. And so we gave him the example, it's a very simple example, that in history, in the history of the human race, there have been many big bangs, bombs, and that sort of thing. And, like particularly Hiroshima, Nagasaki at the end of the Second World War, and these are really big bangs, just huge bangs on places of civilization. And those big bangs did not just in and of themselves produce some nice city or town or some nice anything. They just destroyed on a phenomenal scale, amazing destruction. If you see aerial photographs of what those cities looked like afterwards, it's amazing. Just everything flattened, basically. So, and there have been many such big bangs. Many bombs have been exploded, thousands, maybe millions. And every single one of them has simply produced destruction. And not one of them has produced Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Not a single one of them has produced anything nice, just in and of itself. However, following those different big bangs, intelligent human beings have come along later and fixed things up. And so even Hiroshima and Nagasaki, actually I've never been to them, but I've seen photographs, and they're modern cities now. They're modern cities with all the usual features of buildings, etc., roads and electrical arrangements, water supply, and all that, done by humans, but not as direct results of those big bangs. So we presented this to the young boy, that it seems that the evidence as such, the experiment, you could say, has been done. The experiment has been done so many times, and the results of the experiment are that absolutely without fail, nothing nice has come from one of these big bangs. So therefore, doesn't it seem to you, we asked him, doesn't it seem to you that this Big Bang theory is just not supported by the reality of life? And this young boy, I mean, he's like a matric age or late teens type of boy. He got all grumpy about it, and he said, no, the Big Bang, I support the Big Bang. So what can you do? If someone's really got an attitude problem or a prejudice, a deep-rooted prejudice, then even you try to demonstrate that whatever their idea is, it just doesn't conform with reality. But simply because there's a prejudice within the heart, they remain attached to some illusory idea and miss the point, really miss the point. And this is the case with Daksha. as was mentioned a couple of days ago, Daksha is on the bodily platform, and he does not have perception, awareness. He's not conscious of the spiritual platform. Therefore, when he evaluates anything, in this case his relationship with Lord Shiva, he's only capable of evaluating their relationship in bodily terms. And he's not able to even be aware, what to speak of really take into consideration the extreme spiritual qualification of Lord Shiva, which is just, it's practically unique. It's just most exalted and elevated. But such a thing just, he is not able to grasp at all, just on the bodily level. And in this case, bodily level means that I am the father of your wife, means the body. From my body, via my wife, has come the body of your wife, and you, or your body, you could say, are married to my daughter. Therefore, you are inferior. I'm superior to you. But you did not recognize that. You did not accept that. When Daksha walked into the assembly, pretty much everyone, almost everyone, stood up out of respect, because he's senior to just about everyone in those terms. But Lord Shiva and actually Lord Brahma did not stand up. They just remained sitting because they're senior to him. Particularly in the case of Lord Shiva, he is spiritually greatly superior, senior, more elevated than Daksha. And that those spiritual positions, they are the positions in life that matter and should be taken into consideration in terms of the interactions between the parties. And therefore, for example, in the first canto, there has been the situation that when Maharaj Parikshit was sitting and inquiring from the assembled sages, what is the duty of a person at the time of death particularly, then Shukadev Goswami walked in, and all the assembled sages, and there were demigods there, Lord Shiva himself was there, and so many others, they all stood up. They all stood up to receive Shukadev, because through their spiritual vision, their spiritual perception, they could understand this person is superior to us, more advanced than us. So they stood up. Even though by these same terms by which Daksha is evaluating, bodily terms, Shukadev Goswami was 16. He's just schoolboy age. There's no question of seniority in bodily terms at all. Rather, he's junior. And even his father, Vyasadeva, was there, who's also his spiritual master, and Narada Muni was there, who is the spiritual master of Vyasadeva, who's the father and spiritual master of Shukadeva. But both of them, when the question arose, who should speak here? Who should actually address the concerns of Maharaj Parikshit? They all, including Vyasadeva, his father and spiritual master, and Narada, his father's spiritual master, they all deferred to Shukadeva. He should speak, because he's the most elevated person here. And these types of questions, you need the most elevated opinions and responses to these types of questions. Yes, so, but unfortunately Daksha, he's just completely fixed on the bodily platform, and he's become entrenched. I mean, he's not just inclined like that. He has become deeply committed on the level of bodily identification and all the different conceptions that arise from that. And therefore he's offensive to Lord Shiva because of their relationship in bodily terms, and just completely missing the spiritual point. Vaishnavanam yata Shambhu, that Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee. As Srila Prabhupada points out, it's an interesting point in the purport. He is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu. That's actually his position. He's not exactly, in absolute terms, just the greatest devotee of all devotees, but he is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu. There are devotees of Lord Krishna who are more advanced than Lord Shiva, but still, Lord Shiva is very advanced, and particularly amongst those who, strictly speaking, are categorized as devotees of Vishnu or Vaishnavas in the technical sense. And Sati is pointing out that he is so elevated, Nama Kirti, Pavitra Kirtim. He is so elevated that his name, just his name of two syllables, Shi and Va, is so extraordinary that just by being chanted, just any chanting, not in some state of meditation, not even many times, but just once. And even Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes the point, even inattentively, if his name is chanted, then that chanting of the name of Shiva just one time, even inattentively, destroys all sins. It destroys all sins and delivers people. Of course, as Srila Prabhupada emphasizes in the purport, that association with Lord Shiva, glorification of Lord Shiva, chanting the name of Lord Shiva, it purifies. It purifies one of all sinful activities, and brings a person, someone who sincerely chants his name, brings a person to the point of spiritual realization. in the sense, and Prabhupada goes to some lengths in the purport there to make the point, spiritual realization in the sense that I am spirit soul. Aham Brahmasmi. I'm an eternal spirit soul, but doesn't necessarily, if one simply chants the name of Lord Shiva or worships Lord Shiva, one can get that realization, but not more. Not realizing what I am as a spiritual being, what type of spiritual being, what is my nature as a spiritual being. Just a very, you could say, simple realization, I am spirit, Aham Brahmasmi, which is something like saying, realizing, I am a human, which is true. I am a human. But what sort of a human? Yes, every human is individual, so that's a deeper level of understanding. So I am spirit. That's a lot better than thinking I am this body. But still, who are you? What are you as a spirit soul? And that, of course, means Jivera Swaruphoya Krishna Nityadas, that the nature of the soul is to be the eternal servant of Krishna. And there's so many different types of servants of Lord Krishna. It's very specific and very personal. So, by the mercy of Lord Shiva, it is possible to go beyond that initial realization, Aham Brahmasmi, that I'm spirit soul. By the mercy of Lord Shiva, it is possible to go forward and realize that I'm the servant. As a spiritual person, I'm the servant of the Supreme Lord. But then one has to, as Prabhupada says, if a person is intelligent enough, he should continue to act in the way of Lord Shiva, to follow in his footsteps in terms of one's practical activities, and not simply chant his name or meditate on his name like that. But one should act in the way of Lord Shiva, because Lord Shiva is always absorbed in thought of Vasudeva, of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada refers to Lord Shiva in Shiva Purana, famous verse, Aradhananam Sarvesham Vishnor Araditam Param, that of all forms of worship, Aradhananam Sarvesham, of all forms of worship, Vishnor Araditam Param, the worship of Lord Vishnu is supreme. That's Lord Shiva himself speaking in Shiva Purana. And as we mentioned earlier, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, Lord Shiva. Who is Lord Shiva? What is Lord Shiva? As a person, he is a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, one should not make that mistake. If someone has somehow or other made some advancement through chanting the name of Lord Shiva, one should not feel that is the end of it. That's the conclusion, the final point, that through chanting the name of Lord Shiva, I realize Aham Brahmasmi, I'm spirit soul. But one has to then follow in his footsteps in terms of practical activity and become a devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as he is. And one should certainly not equate Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. One should not equate them. But understand that Lord Shiva is subordinate and is the great servant of Lord Vishnu. Otherwise, one gets into an atheistic position or very, very confused position. So there are many pastimes in which that subordinate position of Lord Shiva is demonstrated. He himself demonstrates. We mentioned the other day the pastime in the 10th canto, if I remember correctly, with Vrikasura. Lord Shiva was saved by Lord Krishna from the attack of the demon Vrikasura, who had become powerful by the grace of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is known as he who is very easily satisfied, Asheshvara, he who fulfills people's desires. And he's famous for sitting under the banyan tree chanting on his beads. What is he chanting? He's actually chanting the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But then because he has a duty as a servant of the Supreme Lord to fulfill people's material desires, then when materialistic worshippers come and request material things from him, he is obliged to fulfill their desires. But he's not happy about it. He's famous for fulfilling people's material desires very quickly, but not because he feels that it's very nice to do that. He's happy to fulfill people's material desires. No, but because he wants to get rid of them as quickly as possible so he can go back to his chanting of the names of the Supreme Lord. And he gives people wealth and palaces, houses, and whatever. But he himself is living under a tree. He doesn't wear anything fancy. Sometimes he wears just some animal skin or some cloth which he picked up, which fell off a dead body in the process of cremation, and just wears that cloth himself. So he is not at all appreciative of these things which he is blessing other people to have. He avoids them because he wants to remain absorbed in Krishna consciousness as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is Lord Shiva. And Sati is just chastising her father. My gosh, it's amazing. She's really chastising him, and is going to, as I understand, going to continue chastising him for the next quite some number of verses, just again and again and again, chastising and chastising and chastising her father. And just an interesting little grammatical point is that in this verse, she addresses her father when she says, you are like this, you are like that. She uses the Sanskrit term bhavan. Bhavan. Bhavan is just like you have in Hindi, in French, in many languages, you have you for juniors or equals, people who are close like that. Then you have another form of the word you for seniors and respectable people, like tum and ap, or in French, tu and vous, or in Russian also, ti and vi. So in many of the older languages, you have these two levels. She is addressing her father using the respectful term for a senior. Bhavan is reserved for those who are senior to you. So she's chastising him extremely heavily, but using the respectful form that you, senior person, you are just a nonsense, number one, unbelievable nonsense. Hare Krishna. Any comments, questions? We got two questions, two devotees here.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I wanted to ask a question about the Shiva worship, because a lot of devotees, well, mostly the Western devotees, they tend to be quite attracted to Shiva worship, and they often have also either little Shiva lingam or picture of Shiva on the altar. So generally, they see Shiva as Kopeshwara Mahadev, somebody who would open the way to Vrindavan to them. But is there any other specifics or intricacies how we should, we as devotees, how we should see Shiva, and how much benefit does it even?
Yeah, I'm aware of a few devotees who keep little Shiva lingas. Not so many, but a few, including some very senior devotees. Srila Prabhupada, just in general, in regard to demigods, Prabhupada was asked, what if someone's inclined to, offer some sort of respect or whatever to demigods, not just Lord Shiva, then as a Vaishnava, what can one do? And Srila Prabhupada replied that you can recite the verses from Brahma Samhita, which are glorifying. It's only, I think, 5 of the main demigods, but you can do that. And I'm not aware of Srila Prabhupada, talking about, I'm not aware, put it that way, how we might actually do some sort of formal type of worship. And therefore, anyway, certainly we should appreciate Lord Shiva as a great Vaishnava, very great Vaishnava. In Vrindavan, he's particularly merciful as Gopeshwar, and he helps the devotees. But I think for the devotees in general, it's not a good idea to really get into these types of things. Put it that way.
I'm asking also because I have great attachment personally to Lord Shiva. I'm also one of the people who has a little Shiva lingam
we caught you.
For 12 years now. That time when I got him, you mentioned that Kopeshwara Mahadev would be a sort of nice mood to worship him in. I just wanted to give my 2 cents also about Big Bang Theory. I've had those arguments also, and yes, absolutely. There has never been any sort of conclusive test done in vacuum with different particles. Nothing good has been produced. But at the same time, there is ample proof of second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. If you leave anything long enough alone in material world, it will just end up in disorder, disarray, and chaos.
Because of the booming and everything, I couldn't follow.
I can maybe quickly say again that Big Bang theory is unapprovable. Nobody can prove it. They have been tested, but it cannot be proven. But there is ample of proof of second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. Leave anything long enough alone in material world, and it will end up in chaos and disarray.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, that's right. The material world has this, everything deteriorates. You make something nice, and from the point where you complete the process of making it, it just deteriorates. Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to thank you, Maharaj, for your point that seniority doesn't depend on material circumstances like age, but it depends on Krishna consciousness, because definitely I can recognize that some of the devotees coming in now I can regard as my seniors, maybe not in terms of how many years I've been in the movement or how long I've been chanting, at least in this life, but in terms of their Krishna consciousness, that they're coming in with something, I think, definitely from previous lives. So I just wanted to glorify them because they've been doing this for longer than me. And I also had a question that, is Bhrigu Muni the spiritual master of the demigods?
Bhrigu Muni, spiritual master of?
The demigods.
Bhrigu Muni? Not exactly. Brihaspati.
Oh, Brihaspati, sorry, yes. Okay. And then...
Yeah, he's sort of spiritual master come priest. Bit of a sort of, something like that.
Okay. Because I was wondering about the dynamics between Lord Shiva, Sati, and Brihaspati. Does Lord Shiva take instruction from Brihaspati, and does Sati look more to Brihaspati for instruction, or does she look more towards Lord Shiva for instruction?
Well, we don't have descriptions of the relationship between Brihaspati and Lord Shiva, but I would not doubt that seeing Brihaspati such a great soul, Lord Shiva would be happy to be instructed by him, and Brihaspati would be very happy to be instructed by Lord Shiva, something like that. But I would say that Sati, she would take shelter more of Lord Shiva, because she knows who he is. He's a form of the Supreme Lord, like a special type of form of the Supreme Lord.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.